Welcome to Geometry A. Please use the following example to help you complete your practice problems for this lesson. Example 1. Use the statement, if n is greater than 2, then n squared is greater than 4. A. Find the converse, inverse, and contrapositive. B. Determine if the statements from the part A are true or false. If they are false, find a counterexample. For part A we first need to use if-then statements. The original statement is set up as if P, then Q. So if n is greater than 2, then n squared is greater than 4, where P equals n is greater than 2 and Q is n squared greater than 4. The converse of the original statement is set up as if Q, then P. So the converse of the original statement would be if n squared is greater than 4, then n is greater than 2. Where Q equals n squared is greater than 4 and P equals n is greater than 2. The inverse of the original statement is set up as if not P, then not Q. So the inverse of the original statement would be if n is less than 2, then n squared is less than 4. Where not P equals n is less than 2 and not Q equals n squared is less than 4. The contrapositive of the original statement is set up as if not Q, then not P. So the contrapositive of the original statement would be if n squared is less than 4, then n is less than 2. Where not Q is n squared is less than 4 and not P is n is less than 2. For part B we now need to see if we can find a counterexample, an example that disproves the conjecture, for the converse, the inverse, and the contrapositive of the original statement. This will prove each of them to be either true or false. The converse of the original statement is if n squared is greater than 4, then n is greater than 2. This converse is false because n could be a negative number that when squared would be greater than 4. An example would be -3. If n equals -3, n is less than 2, but when -3 is squared it equals 9, which is greater than 4. The inverse of the original statement is if n is less than 2, then n squared is less than 4. This inverse is false because n could be a negative number that when squared would be greater than 4. An example would be -3. If n equals -3, n is less than 2, but when -3 is squared it equals 9, which is greater than 4. The contrapositive of the original statement is if n squared is less than 4, then n is less than 2. This contraposition is true. The only square number that is less than 4 is 1, since 1 squared or -1 squared is equal to 1, which is also less than 2.